Welcome to another Zoom at Noon here at Columbus Academy. I'm John Wuorinen, the Director of Admissions and Tuition Assistance, and joining me today I have John Exline, class of 1964, longtime history teacher here at Columbus Academy and the financial aid coordinator for us. So we'll be talking just a little bit about the tuition assistance process and how it all works. So look forward to hearing any of the questions that you out there want to have answered. As always, we're behind the scenes is the helpful member of our admissions team, Anika Littell. And if you'll put any questions that you have into the chat, she will be curating those for us and passing that information along to us. Oh yeah, please, that's a good idea. And we are in Mr. Exline's his classroom here. So he just finished with an economics class. The seniors who were here might be just a little bit tired. On Saturday evening, we had a lock-in. The school sponsored a lock-in for the senior class. And I actually, John, I had the early shift.
I had the last shift.
And so I was here from about 6:30 till 12:30. And at midnight, the kids got to eat. And John, your room was one of the eating, eating rooms here. So I was
pleasantly surprised by how clean it was when I got here. I had the 4:30 to 9 shift. So
the breakfast
and cleanup.
So, yeah. Well, in any case, we are here to share some information about tuition assistance with you. Just a quick plug for next week's Zoom at Noon, which is going to be on the arts. So we'll have a quick look at our arts program here. But if I can start off just talking a little bit about the theory behind tuition assistance. What we're talking about this morning is actually need-based tuition assistance, or this afternoon is actually need-based tuition assistance. Columbus Academy offers very few what people call scholarships. A lot of times people use the word scholarship and financial aid interchangeably. For us, it actually, there's a big difference. The need-based tuition assistance is, again, people apply, they talk about their financial situation, and the school ends up hopefully being able to allocate resources based on a family's need. Scholarships, on the other hand, for us, imply that the financial need is not taken into account and that the scholarship is being awarded for some other reason, some special talent often. So we're talking about need-based tuition assistance this morning. So the process in terms of I should mention first the theory, sorry about that. The theory is that Columbus Academy has a price tag associated with the cost of educating each child. Interestingly, the cost that we charge for every family here at the school is less than the cost of education. Each student is subsidized by about a $4,000 grant, in a sense, in effect, because we have some other avenues for funding. One is our annual fund. We each year we ask families to contribute philanthropically, and then also we have the return on our endowment. The school has about a $40 million endowment, and we take a draw against that each year to help with the operating budget. The rest of the tuition assistance budget, it's about $3.8 million between fundraising and the draw against our endowment returns. Uh, Between those two, it actually does not pay fully for our tuition assistance. The remaining amount of tuition assistance is actually made up through the operating budget, the operating fund, to other people's tuition dollars. So we have a $3.8 million tuition assistant budget. There are just under 300 students presently who receive tuition assistance. So the average tuition assistance grant is about half tuition, roughly. The idea is that the price tag of Columbus Academy is such that not everyone, not all families will be able to afford a Columbus Academy education for their children. So what the idea is, the plan is that families apply for tuition assistance. We go through an allocating process, and hopefully we can make an offer to families to make Columbus Academy affordable for them. That is not always a possibility. We end up each year having more requests for tuition assistance than we have in our budget. So there's typically, John, it's about 15%, between 80 and 85% of demonstrated need that we're able to meet. It is a scarce resource. And so families apply. They go through a company. This year, we're using a company called SSS by Community Brands. Families apply online, put in a bunch of financial information data that this company SSS uses. They have algorithms that calculate for us what a family in different situations should be able to afford for Columbus Academy. Do you know much about that algorithm, John?
I do know that the determination of what they refer to as the EFC, the estimated financial contribution, is based upon a determination of discretionary income, which is total income minus certain aspects of expenditure that people are expected and allowed to meet. It isn't a situation where we say you have to spend, 50% of your income on tuition. We take into consideration medical, unusual expenses, allowances, additional taxes, size of family. So it's not a one size fits all type of process. It's a lot of it is science in terms of the algorithms part, but there is also some art involved in terms of how many students are attending tuition charging schools. If those tuition charging schools are schools other than the Columbus Academy, we take into consideration the fact that it might be less, it might be more, and then play that into our system to try and figure out what's best. We also tend to provide a slightly smaller percentage of financial need at the lower school level than at the middle school, and the middle school a little less than at the upper school. The idea being that we give full financial need at beginning at kindergarten or pre-kindergarten, we've got a very substantial amount of money that we would have to provide for tuition over a 14 or 13 or 12 year time frame. So although the algorithms are very important in providing a starting place for our calculations for financial need, we also, as I said, take into consideration other factors that we feel are important in trying to determine how we can best allocate the funds that we do have.
We definitely look at individual circumstances, individual families, but in general, the lower school grants are capped at 50% tuition. As I say, it is a scarce resource every year. The requests for tuition assistance outpace the budget that we have, and so because of that, at the lower level, again, families could be receiving tuition assistance beginning in pre-K, and so that represents a 14-year commitment from the school. If a student is enrolling later in 9th grade, we get to recycle those tuition assistance dollars a little bit more rapidly, and we can commit more of our resources to each individual child the older they are Um, So, um, John, as you think about tuition assistance and the application process, obviously deadlines are important,
right?
um, and talk a little bit, if you will, about individual circumstance. And a family goes ahead and applies.
Right. It's first of all, it's required that you apply each year. It's not you apply the first time you're applying to school and then we carry that same information along, because circumstances change for families, both positively and negatively in terms of their financial situation. So each year, that application is looked at and we take into consideration what the family was able to pay the previous year. But at the same time, if there are changes in job situations, if there are additional children, family gets larger. In some cases, unusual circumstances occur that will limit an ability for a family to pay. We might take that into consideration, particularly if we see it as a one-year problem that we can help them over the hump, and then the next year they're able to get back to what they paid in previous years. But understand that this is not something where if you received a $10,000 tuition assistance amount the first year, that it would remain the same every year. We also have to take into consideration that tuition does increase each year. And we also take that into consideration, the bump, so to speak, from one year to the next. Sometimes it might be as small as $900, other times, depending upon the grade level, going from one division, middle school to upper school, for example, it might be somewhat larger. So those are all situations we have to take into consideration when we decide what your tuition assistance is going to be for the coming year. It's not necessarily what it was from the previous year.
Sure. And when we talk about a family having to apply each year, one of the questions that we often get is, okay, so I came in last year and received a $10,000 grant. Is that $10,000 going to be consistent? John was referring to the fact that because of inflation and because there's routinely a bump in grade level cost for tuition, that those things will increase. If a family has the net tuition of $10,000, what our hope and expectation is that that family, assuming no significant change in financial situation, that family should have roughly a net of $10,000 tuition for each year. So it's not like we're going to bring you in at $10,000 this year and next year we're going to say, oh, it's now 11 and then it's 12, etc. We do have families apply each and every year, and that's very important for us because it's a one-year grant. But make sure that you understand NAIS, the National Association of Independent Schools, their principles of good practice say, as a family comes in, if there's no substantive change, that grant would remain the same. One thing that I also ought to mention is families often ask, what sort of things is SSS looking for? What sort of things is Columbus Academy looking for? We do not expect families to, as we say, live like church mice. We understand a family vacation. We understand, obviously a home, saving for retirement, saving for college. But because, once again, these are scant resources, what we need to be doing is balancing. If a family is a member of a country club, if a family drives luxury cars, if the family needs new cars every couple of years, these are costs that the school needs to weigh and consider, because, again, we are actually allocating this very valuable resource, and other families here at the school are bearing the costs. So it's important that the financial aid committee be good stewards of these resources.
And we also expect, and we have this situation because as kids graduate from the academy, then they go on to college, We also expect where you have multiple children in the school that you are fully applying for tuition assistance at the college level. If you are going to apply for tuition assistance here, we also expect you to apply for tuition assistance at the college level, so that our tuition assistance for a student at the school is actually not providing partial payment for the college education for a sibling. So once again, we expect the same amount to be received in tuition assistance for a college student that you're receiving for the academy in terms of your total payment, your net payment for the school.
Just a little bit about the timeline. Families who are applying for admission are going to hear admissions decisions on March 1st if they've completed the application in time for the first round decision. Many of our families who are applying are also applying for admission, are also applying for tuition assistance. And so in order for us to be able to reply to families in terms of what the cost of Columbus Academy would be, we need those families to be applying for tuition assistance at the same time, contemporaneously, while they are applying for admission. Just a quick historical note, when I took over the admissions office 15 years ago, the admissions process happened like it is right now. Families hearing about admissions decisions on March 1st. The applications for tuition assistance were not even due until March 15th, and families wouldn't hear until late April about their tuition assistance grants. That really doesn't work for families. They need to know once admitted, am I able to come? So what we've done is admissions and tuition assistance, the application processes happen at the same time, but they are unrelated. Mr. Exline and I are the only two who sit on both the admissions committee and the tuition assistance committee. So we really are trying to separate those two. Admissions processes happen separately from the tuition assistance process.
And one of the reasons for that, for the change, one of the reasons we previously had the separation was it was important, we felt, to get tax returns, and obviously coming at as early as February 1st, it's oftentimes difficult to have a tax return available at that point. So we don't require the tax return if you haven't completed it. If you have, that's great. If you haven't completed it, however, we do require you to send in certain documents, W-2s, tax return, once those are completed. And although it rarely happens, occasionally we'll have to adjust a tuition assistance grant based upon differences that might occur in your taxes relative to what was originally we used in the EFC. So understand that because we now have tuition assistance and admissions at an earlier date or at the same time earlier, that we still ask for those tax returns, tax documents, but we don't require them at the same time that you make your application for tuition assistance.
Right. So applications are made with estimates, and some families are concerned about that. There is you don't have to be spot on by any stretch. There is a little bit of a cushion that is definitely allowed. A couple things that I should mention. We routinely have families that are students who are applying, and the parents are in two separate households. Perhaps they weren't married, perhaps they were divorced, and so there are two separate households. NAIS Principles of Good Practice and Columbus Academy says both families must apply for tuition assistance. If there's any problem there, each year we'll get a question or two that I end up talking with the family, but it is unusual for us to release either parent of their obligation to both complete and then fund the education of a child. I'm happy to talk more offline if any particular parent out there needs that conversation. Anika, are there any questions yet?
I don't think so.
Okay. Once again,
Someone has their hand up.
oh, okay.
I can let them talk.
Okay. I prefer they put the question in the chat and then you can curate the question. But just in the interest of confidentiality, frankly. One of the things that I should mention, while we do encourage any questions to happen here, one of the very important aspects of tuition assistance is that it is confidential. We take that responsibility very, very seriously. Before moving over into the admissions office, I tell this story often. Before moving over into the admissions office, I was the dean of students in the high school, dealing with families and students on a very personal and sensitive level. Columbus Academy, I had no knowledge of students in terms of their receiving or not of tuition assistance. I know that we have students here on campus who are unaware, particularly in the lower school level, unaware that they are on tuition assistance. The faculty do not know who receives tuition assistance and who doesn't. Indeed, when a family receives a grant, we try not to call them awards. Every now and then we'll slip, but these are grants. They don't have to be repaid. When the family signs their tuition assistance grant letter, there's actually one of the pieces that you're signing is that you will maintain confidentiality about any grant that is received. And if we discover that a family is discussing such matters, it actually could be a grounds for retraction. Again, we want this to be a very confidential process. So, Anika, did the question come through?
Yeah, so they'd like to know if they are not in contact with the child's other parent and they have no way to contact them, how they would go about doing the application and how it'd be considered complete.
It needs to be a quick email conversation frankly, with me as the director of admissions and tuition assistance. Our rule actually is 7 years. If a student has not had contact in the past 7 years, that we can waive that policy easily. Again, there are exceptions to this rule, and we just like we do in our academic program, just like we do in our extracurricular program, we are meeting the needs of individual students in the same way. The admissions office and tuition assistance office wants to make sure that we are meeting individual needs. We still can't make any guarantees, but we definitely want to hear more about each situation where applicable. I hope that makes sense.
Yep.
Is there another one at this point, Nancy or Anika?
Not right now, but the Q&A box is open. So.
Just to make sure that people understand, we make our admissions decisions for a March 1st notification date. The financial aid, the tuition assistance committee doesn't meet until after we know which the admitted students are. So those admitted students right at the end of February, Mr. Exline and I and the tuition assistance committee are working very, very hard to get those grants out. So parents who are applying for admission will hear March 1st. It could be as much as 2 days later that families will hear about a grant that is able to be made for the family. So the tuition will appear on every contract as full tuition. The grant letter is actually an addendum to the contract, and those monies would come off of any of the tuition. Both the tuition assistance grant letter and the contract will be due back about March 10th I don't remember the exact date, about March 10th, with a non-refundable $500 deposit. That deposit and the contract work in tandem to hold a child's spot till April 30th. And then on May 1st, the families need to understand that the contract becomes fully enforced, and families will be liable for the entire tuition. So I just wanted to make that clear. So when I have lots of families who call up and say, I got my child got in, but on March 1st, but we must not have gotten any tuition assistance. Don't panic. It just takes us a couple of days to be processing that. We are working hard. Other things that, John, that you think we need to share with our families?
Well, once again, I think as John mentioned earlier, I think the understand that there's a lot of information that's asked for on the SSS, and it's not a situation where we're trying to pry into your life, but at the same time, there are a lot of situations which differentiate one family from another in terms of their ability to pay. This is particularly true where you have a business, for example, and some of the more difficult calculations are made where that business exists, because we have to go through it and determine how much of the business income actually then is available to the family. So it is important that you are as complete as possible in filling out the financial aid application, and also to be careful. Each year we have several people who misplace a decimal point, or
I think we had someone this year who made $188 million or
that's
something.
right. Yeah. And I said, well, if they're applying for it, kind of, but it turned out they misplaced the decimal point. So make sure you're, to check over your application before. Usually, I mean, we can correct, but it extends the period of time before we can give you your grant. So, filling that out as completely as possible, giving us any information. There's one segment on the application that asks for additional information, which basically involves anything that might affect your ability to contribute to the cost of education that isn't covered on the application. A parent who is very ill, a grandparent who's very ill that you have to help support, or something like that, that should be included on that additional information so that we can take into consideration whatever factors might affect your ability to pay. That's what we're looking at. We don't want to try to make it too difficult for you. And at the same time, we want to make sure that it's fair to everyone, so that we aren't giving a lot of tuition assistance to one family who has a very similar circumstance to another family with the same situation financially. So try to be as complete as possible, and also check over those numbers to make sure you put the zeros in the right place.
Right. Anika, any last questions?
Nope.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us. If you have further questions about tuition assistance, do feel free to email me here at Columbus Academy, Wuorinen j@columbusacademy.org. You can find the email quickly. So next week we do talk about the arts here at Columbus Academy. So we look forward to seeing you back and having you join us a week from today. Have a good week.
Thank you.